Welcome back. A new focus group featuring Wisconsin swing voters is giving new insight into what this key group is thinking 4 months into the Trump administration.
So we decided to ask Rich Tao, who led that group, what it all means.
There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond.
When President Trump won Wisconsin in November, he did so with the help of the state's key swing voters, those who voted for President Biden in 2020 and President Trump in 2024.
He's doing basically what he ran on.
Yeah, I think he's trying to be more efficient with government spending.
A new focus group commissioned by the research firm Engageus talked with 12 of those Biden-Trump voters. 10 proclaimed independents and 2 Republicans from these 7 counties, including Milwaukee and Waukesha. And while they expressed some concern,
I love the policies you're trying to get through, but why do you have to be such an egotistical idiot in public?
Well, the number one thing that he had said when he was running for the campaign and when he won was that he was going to, number one, fix the economy. And that kind of went by the wayside when he got in.
Despite some of the concern, 9 of the 12 said they so far approve of President Trump's actions, and none of them said they would vote for former Vice President Kamala Harris if they could do so again. Rich Tao led the focus group. With this group of swing voters here in Wisconsin, this snapshot, this moment in time, can this tell us anything? Can this predict what the midterms may potentially look like for Republicans or Democrats?
Well, at this point, I think most of these folks, as I said, are still sticking with the president. And they're sticking with his policies. They like what he's doing. They might not love the way he goes about doing it, but they swallow the things they don't like about him to get to the things that they do like about him. And that's one of the most important aspects of understanding how they view him. So when it comes to the midterms in 2026, I mean, we're still a year and a half away. That's a long period of time. It's impossible to project. When I interviewed Trump to Biden voters 4 years ago in May of 2021, they were still on board with Biden. They still liked him. And it wasn't until the summer of 21 where Biden's numbers tanked because the Delta variant from COVID and the Afghanistan withdrawal really did a number on his popularity, particularly with swing voters. We aren't even at that point yet in Trump's term. So it's impossible to know what exogenous events will cause people to think differently, potentially about the president, or whether they're just going to continue to support him.
Why is it so important to talk to swing voters in key states like Wisconsin?
It's so important to talk to these swing voters because they often hold in their hands the ability to determine the outcome of the next presidential election. Keep in mind that this past election was decided by about 250,000 people living in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Had those people gone the other way, Kamala Harris would be president today.
Did you find it difficult at all for voters to open up and give you honest answers? There's perhaps some notion out there that people don't want to talk about politics anymore. Have you found that?
Well, I'm laughing because in my first of 2 sessions I did with Wisconsin voters, for the first time ever, these folks would not stop talking. I had to literally multiple times say, hey, I got to get this done in 90 minutes. Please keep your answers concise. They wanted to talk. They were almost impossible to moderate because they were so intense in their opinions and what they wanted to share. So it was the exact opposite of what one might expect.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because I think that they're feeling a lot of pressure in terms of what's going on in the world, pressure from friends and family. They're thinking about these issues. They're challenged on them. And also because they've taken an odd position in terms of their voting behavior. They are atypical. Most people stick with one party, whether it's D or R, and just keep going. These folks have changed their minds, and I think they feel in a certain way they have to defend what they've done. And it's often painful for them. You know, if they voted for Trump this time, they voted for Biden before that, that means if they voted for Biden in 2020, they had abandoned Trump after 4 years. So there's, I'm sure, a lot going on in their minds about how they feel about Trump. And I think they just have a lot to vocalize.
Up next, the flag at the Capitol.